and welcome everyone to Dharma Conversations. Thank you for joining us again for this mega series on the destruction of Indian history by Marxists. In the last episode, we covered with Sandeep, an eminent historian, Ram Charan Sharma, and Sandeep with great precision brought out the sabotage and the perversion that he inflicted as a founding chairman of Indian Council of Historical Research. Amongst other things that he called out, one thing that stayed with me was that he actually mentioned that Tirtha Kshetras were built to preserve memories of urban centers that cease to exist. It can't get more ludicrous than that. And we need people like Sandeep who can call these people out for what they are. So as we continue this series, we are in the 7th episode now, and that's why we call it a mega series. We shall be spending time with Sandeep talking about another eminent historian, Irfan Habib, and the damage he inflicted on the Indian psyche, history and multiple generations. With that, let's get started with Sandeep. Hi Sandeep.
Hi,
so let's get started with the 7th episode of the series that we started some time back. And thank you for doing the last episode on Ram Charan Sharma. A lot of what he did was, I think, not well known, and thanks to you, it is now known to a lot of people, and hopefully they're talking about it. So Sandeep, like I said, let's pick on you and your research on this historian, Irfan Habib. So before we get into Irfan Habib and the damage he inflicted, could you just give us a little bit of his antecedents as to how did he come about to becoming what he is, and where did he inherit his talent from?
Yeah, thanks Parag for that lovely introduction. And at the outset of this episode, I must say that all of us at the Dharma Podcast, our channel, YouTube channel, we are rather overwhelmed with the kind of amazing responses that we see both in the comment section and other people who have reached out to me personally. So thanks to our audience. Now, after we have covered, let's see, Romila Thapar, then Ram Charan Sharma. In fact, many people have written to me saying that that was a really eye-opening episode.
It was indeed.
So after Ram Charan Sharma, we can today look at Irfan Habib. Irfan Habib's story actually begins with his father Muhammad Habib, and I have mentioned his name over the course of this series in an incidental way. He was in many ways he was the original distorian, the distorian in chief, the progenitor of history distortion in India. So Muhammad Habib's antecedents: he was married to a lady called Suhaila Tyabji. This Suhaila Tyabji was the granddaughter of Badruddin Tyabji, who was the first Muslim president of the Indian National Congress. Not too many people know this.
The first
Muslim president of
Indian
the
National
Indian
Congress.
National Congress,
Okay.
the pre-independence Indian National Congress.
Okay.
And Muhammad Habib, he finished his formal education in India. Then for higher studies, he went to Oxford. And there at Oxford, he came in close contact with, and then he was greatly influenced by an unvarnished Islamic bigot. His name, Maulana Muhammad Ali.
Okay.
The same Maulana Muhammad Ali of Ali brothers notoriety. He was Muhammad Habib's ustad, completely bigoted man. And this man, Maulana Muhammad Ali, he extended generous patronage to his protege. And by the way, Muhammad Ali was also responsible for spearheading what eventually became the Khilafat movement and led to the genocide of Hindus in Malabar.
Okay. So
Same Maulana Muhammad Ali.
So this Maulana that you referred to, was he in Oxford or he happened to be?
He was in Oxford.
Oh,
he was in Oxford.
Okay.
Now, after Muhammad Habib completed his higher studies in Oxford, his ustad, Maulana Muhammad Ali, he said, "Dekho beta, bahut ho gaya tumhara Oxford ka studies. You're finished with flying colors or whatever. You have to do something for the Qawm. You have to do something for the cause. So come back to India. The cause will be served, better if you are here. And then, so this guy, Muhammad Habib, he did his Ustad's call, returned to India and began teaching at Jamia Millia. Okay. One of the alumnus of Jamia Millia is a lady named Barkhadat.
Excellent.
Okay, you see where how this whole poisonous tree is.
The talent pool.
Talent pool. Now, after spending some time in Jamia Millia, Muhammad Habib then jumped to the newly founded Aligarh Muslim University. There he joined first as a reader and then eventually was promoted as the professor of history in 1922 or 23.
The string of secular institutions.
But overall, in general, Muhammad Habib's seminal contributions in seeding the distortion of Islam's brutal history in India can be summed up in the following bullet points. First, Islamic invasion of India was a myth. Second,
Islamic invasion was a myth.
Was a myth.
Okay.
So these are some of the seminal, foundational narrative of Indian history that Muhammad Habib seeded for the first time. Okay. Point number one, like I said, Islamic invasion of India was a myth. Point number two, Muslim invaders were not motivated by their religious tenets in their conquests of India. Point number three, the large-scale forcible conversions of Hindus were an even bigger myth because, in his own words, millions of low-caste Hindus voluntarily and joyfully accepted the universal brotherhood of Islam in order to escape Brahminical oppression.
Oh, wonderful.
All right. This is point number 3. Point number 4. Islam was actually a liberating force in India, which for the first time introduced true social equality in the country, as a result of which lakhs of Hindus voluntarily helped to build magnificent mosques and palaces and other monuments for Muslim sultans and nawabs and rulers. Point number 5, the last point. Aurangzeb's vast empire of Islamic bigotry imploded due to a revenue crisis and not because of his industrial scale oppression of Hindus, which led them to launch a nationwide rebellion against his rule.
So the economic whitewashing of religious
economic
bigotry.
crisis is why the Mughal Empire under Aurangzeb, disintegrated and declined. Okay, so these are 5 points which we shall see, in different shades of the same narrative as we go along. By the way, Muhammad Habib was also the great Ustad who taught third-rated lessons in Indian history to Jawaharlal Nehru and Indira Gandhi, who was still a small girl.
Oh, so indoctrination happened early.
Happened very early. Okay. Now with that background, let's come to Irfan Habib, his son. A worthy son of a eminently distortionist father. Now, before we actually get into Irfan Habib's industrial scale distortions of Indian history, let's look at a very revealing disclosure, like an overall assessment of what this man continues to represent. All right. This comes from the writing, from the autobiography of the eminent archaeologist K.K. Mohammed. This is what he writes in his autobiography, and I quote, Professor Habib is a hard-working person, but crafty. His group would threaten, cheat, and would be part of various intrigues. Anyone who criticized this group would be branded as a Hindutva and communalist. Professor MGS attributes this group for making Babri Masjid a national issue. According to Muhammad, I'm paraphrasing this one. According to K.K. Mohammed, it was during the Babri Masjid issue that Irfan Habib's mask of secularism was completely stripped off. It came away.
Okay.
As the head of a government body, which is ICHR, Irfan Habib should not have taken sides in the dispute. Okay, now I'm quoting K.K. Mohammed again. People saw this as an effort to increase his influence by taking sides with the Muslim side in the dispute. Another encounter, which Muhammad mentions, occurred in the presence or in front of an interview panel consisting of top officials, for example, the Vice Chancellor and Irfan Habib. During the interview, the Vice Chancellor said he could not consider anyone for the Aligarh Muslim University who did not respect Professor Habib. K.K. Muhammad replied that the respect has to be earned and not demanded. Another case one more case, this is amazing. In this case, when someone with less marks, exam marks, someone with less marks and no postgraduate diploma was given the post of an assistant archaeologist instead of K.K. Muhammad.
Okay.
Muhammad also shows, in his book, he also has evidence against a false accusation that Irfan Habib had made against him. When K.K. Muhammad said all of this in that interview panel, Irfan Habib sat there with his eyes cast down. And K.K. Muhammad writes, and I quote, "I was sure that he would stab me at the first given opportunity."
Kudos to K.K. Muhammad.
Very courageous man.
Very courageous.
Kudos to him.
Exception.
And his service. Okay, this is the kind of overall assessment of what this man stands for, Irfan Habib. And his long and toxic career as a distortionist par excellence, it falls into 4 broad phases, and we look at each of them one by one. The first phase comprises Irfan Habib's early years and his rise to power and influence in the history establishment as the worthy son of a eminent whitewasher, Muhammad Habib, at the Aligarh Muslim University. In fact, for several decades, Irfan Habib treated the AMU as his personal fiefdom. He awarded and promoted all those who toed his line and destroyed the careers of those who merely disagreed with him.
The champion of freedom of speech.
Champion of freedom of speech, you see, yeah. The second phase, this involves Irfan Habib's numerous stints as a chairman of the Indian Council for Historical Research, ICHR. This was a role he performed with the acumen and the attitude of a medieval Muslim tyrant. Irfan Habib was chairman of the ICHR for a record 5 terms, non-consecutively, and at other times he was on its management board as a member. And guess what? Irfan Habib became the ICHR chairman with retrospective effect for 2 times.
Out of the 5, 2 were retrospective.
Retrospective effect. How does that work? Huh?
So it is again like his fiefdom, like the...
Totally.
Totally. The university was.
These are all in government records. Announcing him, appointing him as chairman with retrospective effort. How does it work, sir?
And these appointments are done by the Ministry of Education?
Yeah. HRD, whatever. And not only that, Irfan Habib, along with other eminent historians like Bipan Chandra, Romila Thapar, Shri Mali and all those guys, they continuously awarded themselves several projects. For example, one translation project of their own books and collections of articles.
So they created a project of their own books and awarded themselves.
Yeah. Okay. And let's see. There's one more, and this is interesting. They cooked up something called a medieval sources project sometime in the 1970s.
Okay.
Medieval sources of history, basically.
Okay.
In 1970s. In this endeavor, in this criminal enterprise, Irfan Habib pocketed a tidy sum of 27,000 rupees for working on something called the Akbarat-e-Aurangzeb. Basically, news reports and news chronicles of Aurangzeb's period.
Okay.
Till date, this man has not written a single line on this work. 27 grand in 1970s. My dad's salary in that time was something like $150 or something. Monthly salary.
And no output.
No output. Okay. Then there was another translation project in which Irfan Habib receives a lump sum payment of $11,000. I mean, the list, I've read out, all these financial irregularities in a previous episode.
I remember. Yeah.
So just because, for relevance, I'm mentioning these two projects. Overall, I think it appears that the ICHR, they had transformed the ICHR into a private bank for all these plunderers who call themselves as historians. So evidently they could dip into its funds as and when they felt like, taking some money, taxpayer money. And of course, who can forget the fact that this was the same Irfan Habib who wrote a glowing foreword to Paramatma Sharan's work, which had been plagiarized by Tasneem Ahmed, who was Irfan Habib's shagird or student. For this work, that Tasneem Ahmed got a PhD.
So he got a PhD for a plagiarized work.
Okay. So this is the second phase. And the third phase is perhaps the most significant, which is the nation-wrecking role that Irfan Habib played during the Ayodhya episode. And we look into these details later in this episode. The fourth stage in Irfan Habib's notorious career is his emergence as slightly better than a street thug. In 2019, Irfan Habib shared the stage with Kerala Governor Shri Arif Muhammad Khan, and he physically tried to prevent Arif Muhammad Khan from speaking at a public function in Kannur.
I have this video.
On the dais, he was pushing Arif Muhammad Khan.
Yes. This went viral.
This is a behavior of a street gunda.
As recent as 2019.
Street gunda. How old is this guy Irfan Habib? Now he is about 90 or 91 years old. So 90 minus 4, he was 85, 86 years old when he pushed, tried to shove Arif Muhammad Khan.
Okay. He displayed his classy behavior.
Okay, right. Now let's break it down one by one. Of all the eminent historians, Irfan Habib has been the most vocal propagandist of rewriting Indian history in order to force fit it into Karl Marx's insane theories. He has also been the most vicious and consistent denouncer of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, of Hindutva and Hindu Dharma overall. In one of his books or one of his articles, he has called Hindu nationalism as a disease. In 1988, when Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee's government took charge for the first time, the same Irfan Habib led an agitation with other gang members against Vajpayee's government, accusing it of saffronizing Indian history. Remember the term?
Yes, saffronizing.
Okay.
Yeah.
You see how these fellows invent these terms where none exist.
Like you said, the Marxist tactic of sticking a convict's badge, and then they're defensive permanently.
Okay. Saffronizing Indian history. Saffronizing as compared to what?
As compared to what exactly?
As compared to what? You see, real history is only Marxist propaganda. Everything else is either communal or unsecular or saffron. And next year, in 1999, Irfan Habib co-authored a communist pamphlet titled A World to Win, Essays on the Communist Manifesto. See, it leaves nothing to the imagination. Guess who was the other co-author
of this pamphlet?
Take a wild guess.
Romila Thapar?
No. Prakash Karat.
Prakash Karat. Oh, okay.
Okay. He also initiated an extremely ambitious multi-volume project of writing the comprehensive history of India. Its title, A People's History of India.
So what does it mean?
I'll tell you.
Street view?
No. A People's History of India. When you read terms like People's History of India, People's War, anything with peoples, it is a shortcut for calling it a communist history of India. That's all.
Okay.
Because all these fellows always speak on behalf of the people, of the masses, right?
Okay.
So that's
And
how
like
we
you
have to
said in the last
understand.
episode, they always wrote for a general audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. This is not a history of India in any sense of the term, but it is purely unvarnished Marxist propaganda disguised as history. So far, 36 volumes have come out.
So it is present continuous?
It's present continuous.
Okay.
As horrible as that is, this you have to give it to them, because this is among the other strengths of how Marxists have built and sustained their ecosystem for such a prolonged period.
Independent of which government is.
Yes, which government is in power. Okay. From here, let's trace Irfan Habib's rise to power. He earned his spurs as a scholar of Mughal history or medieval Muslim history with a publication of his book titled The Agrarian System of Mughal India 1556 to 1707. This work was published in 1963. Okay. This is what catapulted him into fame as a scholar of Mughal history, like I said. In itself, I've read this book. In itself, the book is well researched. It is data rich. I mean, the primary sources, you don't have to go anywhere else searching for all the primary sources. That is its only utility as far as the book is concerned.
But isn't it a paradox? The Islam rule and agrarian.
No. The agrarian system of Mughal India. Okay, for about 2.5 centuries. So he has studied the agricultural system during the Mughal period.
Okay. Given eating preferences, I thought it was a paradox.
I'll tell you, what it says. Okay. Like I said, the book is well researched. It is rich in data, etc. But what it does is its interpretations strictly follow the Marxist line, and its conclusions are completely mind-boggling, to say the least. I'll come to these things in a bit.
Some instances will be good.
But I must say that with this book, Irfan Habib attained the dubious distinction of single-handedly banishing Jadunath Sarkar's gold standard works of Mughal history.
So this fame that he acquired with this book managed to...
I'll tell you how that happened. Okay. Until this book came out, nobody, both in the academia and outside, nobody had dared to question Jadunath Sarkar's authority and eminence in this field. So, Habib was definitely very much aware that, questioning Jadunath Sarkar would lead him in, troubled waters. So what he did, like a true distortionist, Irfan Habib did not even bother to question or even mention Jadunath Sarkar's body of work. He simply pretended that Sarkar's work did not exist. And this is what another scholar, he's still in our midst, he lives in the United States. He's written a wonderful book on Jadunath Sarkar, Deepesh Chakrabarti. This is what he says about Irfan Habib's treatment of Jadunath Sarkar. Quote, more than his rejection of specific sources used by Jadunath Sarkar, it was the themes that Habib worked on that signaled the remarkable shift in historiography. Habib was avowedly Marxist. His very last footnote in the book is a reference to the selected works of Mao Zedong. He was secular in the Indian sense of the word. He sought the causes of Mughal decline in a revenue crisis of the empire. Remember?
The template that you mentioned earlier.
Irfan Habib wrote about the agrarian crisis that plagued the Mughal empire and contributed to its destruction, but he did so without any reference to Sarkar's propositions, as if the volumes did not exist for Irfan Habib. Close quote.
So there must have been others who were waiting for this kind of a book and person to emerge.
Yes.
To sideline Jadunath Sarkar.
It was a kind of a planned and a systematic suppression of real and genuine historical work that their predecessors had done. All right. And now, after this, like I said, let's come to Irfan Habib's alleged interpretations in his agrarian system of Mughal India. I'll mention just two facts to simplify his whole thesis. One, anyone with basic knowledge of pure mathematics and applied statistics, okay, anyone with this basic knowledge knows that you cannot use it to derive hard conclusions in subjective fields like history, economics and sociology, right? But this is exactly what Habib has done and repeatedly done in his book on Mughal agrarian system. In layman's terms, what Irfan Habib does in the book is number crunching with respect to Mughal economics to somehow prove what is essentially his Marxist bias. For example, how this works, I'll give a example to illustrate how this works. For example, take the 16th or the 17th century India. Okay, collect and flush out all the historical data related to price lists of essential commodities or even gold, silver, whatever. Okay, make a list of the prices of all these commodities as available during that 16th or 17th century, and make this list, cull out this price list for a few cities and towns for a few years.
Okay.
And then you extrapolate all these data and then apply it to an entire period of 300 years.
That's the formula.
What you get is utter rubbish, nonsense and dubious economic conclusions.
But what was a historian trying to do with economic conclusions?
I mean, agrarian revenue system, no?
I know, but as a subject matter itself...
Yeah. I mean, that's a valid field of study.
No, it is, but for a historian, I would think it is a strange choice, no?
I mean, these are economic histories which falls under the
from that
broader
standpoint,
purview of
history itself.
Yeah. It's a slice of the overall
larger ambit
subject
of
called
history.
history. And this is precisely what Irfan Habib has done. All right. So, about 20 years back, one plate of poha in Indore would cost you something like 3 rupees or 5 rupees. Whereas one plate of poha in that same period in Bangalore, okay, would cost you not less than 20 rupees.
Okay.
So there's a huge price difference. What this fellow has done is to cull out selective price lists of, say places like Indore for only that period, for say between 1995 to 2000. For Indore, Bulandshahr, Pune, some of these cities for 5-6 years, and then project its conclusions for the entire period related to price and economics for the entire 20th century. This is exactly what he has done for 3 centuries. This is ideology, not economics.
Absolutely.
Much less, it's not history at all. All right? And of course, it is pure communist propaganda. And simplified versions of this sort of distortion were prescribed as lessons on Mughal history in school textbooks. Viola, what do you get? Every student grows up reading these lessons with the impression that the Mughal rule was extraordinary, it was prosperous, and the Mughals made India overflow with milk and honey.
Extremely clever. And obviously there was no
Even today that is the impression. No?
It is. Like you said, they got children. Every episode reinforces that. Right.
But what was the economic reality of the Mughal rule? Take the case of Akbar, the Great. Allegedly in his time, Mughal prosperity, Indian prosperity was the highest. Okay. His own chroniclers, his own courtiers have written in graphic detail that each time Jahanpana Akbar travelled from one city to another, for hunting or wars or, just on a pleasure trip. His entourage would number in not less than 10,000.
Okay.
His begums, his concubines, then his whole staff, palanquin bearers, cooks. And Akbar would insist on using only Ganga water, Ganga Jal.
Akbar would insist on that.
Wherever he went, let's say his capital was Agra, let's say he was in Karachi. What a distance, in that time. So he had runners and water carriers who would go to either Prayagraj or Kashi and get fresh Ganga Jal or transport it all the way to Karachi. Look at the kind of expense and the sheer amount of wastage and extravagance. Why does this escape Habib?
Exactly.
All right. What about Jahangir's decadence? He had separate departments for identifying the most exquisite animals. Let's say for a hunting game, just like the Spanish matadors. That game is there.
So he had departments for these?
Yeah, he had separate departments for this.
So none of these features.
None of these features. And he was taught the art of preparing beer by a gentleman named Sir Thomas Roe, who was England's ambassador to Jahangir's empire. Thomas Roe taught him how to make beer, and this man began to order truckloads of beer. I mean, cartloads of beer.
Understood, yeah. In spite of the
This is also
crisis.
economics.
Yeah.
Yes. Shah Jahan, for example, all his magnificent monuments, allegedly magnificent, Taj Mahal, it took 22 years to build. Some 10 or 12 lakh workers were, a few lakhs at least, were involved in that. Their fingers were chopped off, so they could not construct another monument of equal beauty and splendor. That apart, the Bengal province, which was under Mughal rule, the revenue extortion was so brutal that parents in Bengal would forcibly castrate their young sons and then sell them as slaves in lieu of paying taxes, revenue.
It was horrific.
There was a thriving slave economy in this man's Jahangir's, Shah Jahan's rule.
But it is horrific.
Yeah. And where would these eunuchs, the castrated boys, where would they be employed? They began to flood in Delhi, and they would be employed as doorkeepers and guards in Shah Jahan's Janana, his harem,
Oh.
to guard his begums. You see? And
Horrific.
the one of the most prosperous class, that a new prosperous class that emerged in Shah Jahan's time was dalals or brokers who bought and sold these poor boys, castrated boys.
Terrible, terrible.
Why doesn't Irfan Habib
Mention any of this.
include or mention any of this? Okay, I can go on, but so this is a book that brought him fame, and pretty much another dark chapter of distortions of Indian history began. Old giants like Jadunath Sarkar, all these gentlemen were all completely banned. Anyway, now this is point one. Point two about the same book, Mughal Agrarian System. It comes straight from the horse's mouth. Irfan Habib wrote an article, I think sometime in the 90s, for the communist mouthpiece called The Marxist. It was a magazine. And this article is titled Note Towards a Marxist Perception of Indian History. All right. And this is what Irfan Habib writes in that article, addressing himself in a third person. Remember Sam Pitroda did something?
Yes. After he was called out.
Okay, quote. Irfan Habib's agrarian system of Mughal India quarried the rich documentary material available for the period in an effort to establish the main methods of surplus extraction and the main features of class structure. He concluded that the main exploiting class was the ruling nobility. that the zamindars stood forth as junior co-sharers, the peasantry was highly differentiated, with the village community as an instrument of sub-exploitation. And finally, that the caste system ensured the presence of a large population of landless labor. The surplus entered circulation in the form of commodities, and so the natural economy was confined to subsistence needs within the village. The pressure of revenue led to an agrarian crisis which generated peasant revolts. These last often came under zamindar leadership or assumed a religious garb. Such a picture was closer to Marx's Asiatic mode, with allowance made for commodity production and limited landed property, and the existence of class struggle in one form or another. Close quote. This is complete jargon gibberish.
Yeah, I mean...
But yeah, this is not even plain English. Loaded with, words and phraseology and sentence construction which only Marxists can understand. But above all, there is really nothing in all of Indian history to prove this outlandish and insane conclusion. The whole zamindari system and the zamindari exploitation was real, yes, but they didn't arise due to class revolt or class differences, which Irfan Habib says.
Or Brahminical oppression.
The zamindari oppression as a phenomenon began due to British exploitation. East India Company. But that's a topic for another day. So we can leave this at that.
Okay.
This is a reality, the true character of Irfan Habib's seminal work of historical distortion. Okay. Apart from this, Irfan Habib has written and edited more than 24 books, both on history and his favorite communist Marxist ideology. And all of them fiercely compete with each other in their distortionist quotient. And like in the previous episodes of this series, let's look at just some of his most, his vilest selections in all this corpus of distortions.
So Sandeep, you spoke about the dozen odd books or 24 books that were written and edited by this gentleman. Mm-hmm. Can we get some excerpts from some of these books?
Yeah, certainly. So in general, apart from his history books, allegedly works of history, he's also written on several themes about history, historiography, secularism, Marxism, this kind of thing. What we see in general is Irfan Habib's approach. It is to brand any writing that went against his ideology, went against his bias, to brand all such writings as a communal or RSS brand of writing. And in one of his articles, he says, and I quote, "The rewriting of history by the Sangh Parivar." Okay, this is the article. In that, he has desperately tried to find non-existent links with the RSS indiscriminately. He sees an RSS link everywhere in institutions. This is so ironical. He somehow sees a non-existent link, RSS link to all institutions like NCERT, UGC, ICHR, even the Geological Society of India, the Indian National Science Academy. This, the irony is not lost in him. These are all the institutions his own gang had, captured and monopolized.
Exactly. How can ICHR even fall in this bracket?
You see,
literally
how
the
he
fiefdom.
does, yeah. And likewise, institutions apart, the same branding extends to individuals and scholars as members of the RSS's propaganda factory.
And the same narrative continues today, right?
This article, rewriting of history by Sangh Parivar, it liberally uses words like RSS camp, RSS group, RSS establishment, RSS sponsored scholars, RSS sages, RSS frauds. Liberally. You read that, it's not even funny. But the amount of venom hidden behind those words is unbelievable, Parag.
So blanket RSS prefix are
total,
available.
Total bashing. But, like every true Marxist ideologue worth his salt, Irfan Habib in this article does not cite a single example of any article or any book published by the RSS which could at least present an authentic evidence of what he calls as RSS view of history.
Not a single one.
Not a single evidence. This again is the typical tried and tested tactic of spit and run.
Spit and run.
That's all. Okay. Here is one more example. And I'll read out verbatim. Irfan Habib says, a statement came from the then president of the Indian Council for Historical Research, the late B.R. Grover, that perhaps the original Ayodhya temple was destroyed by Aurangzeb. After all, Grover was installed in that post by the BJP only. Installed. Okay. Remember, this is not written by an motivated journalist or an agenda bashing ideologue or a news trader, but it was written by an allegedly eminent historian who had decorated the great chair of Indian Council for Historical Research.
So what they occupied was on merit, but the others were installed.
Totally. Okay. Now we come to the meat of today's episode, which I had mentioned earlier. This is the third phase of Irfan Habib's long and infamous career. This is Irfan Habib's vile role in the Ayodhya episode. I'll cite only 3 or 4 examples to show the extent of his corrosive mindset. Example 1. This is what Irfan Habib said about the Rama Janmabhoomi excavations directed by the High Court, Allahabad High Court. And these are his own words reported by a newspaper. Quote, Dr. Irfan Habib said, the court directive looked partial because it wants to know if a temple existed at the site before the mosque was built, and the court has directed the Archaeological Survey of India to excavate at the site. This department works under the central government, which is at present led by the Bharatiya Janata Party and the Deputy Prime Minister Lal Krishna Advani and the Human Resources Development Minister Murli Manohar Joshi, who have a influence in the department. This is a historian speaking, giving a public statement. Example 2. And this is where Irfan Habib bears his fangs naked when he says brazenly, quote, on the basis of the Allahabad High Court's decision, communal forces may lay their claim on other structures of historical importance.
So, one is anticipation, the other is scaremongering, both.
You see? No prizes for guessing who the communal forces are.
Yeah,
Hindus. Okay. Here, once again, from the horse's mouth, in other words, according to Irfan Habib, Hindus have absolutely no rights on their most sacred spaces. Demolished, destroyed, vandalized historically by Islamic invaders. Even in peacetime. You see what is operating at the level of the subconscious, at the level of ideology. What operates behind all such vile statements is this. For our Marxist historians like Irfan Habib and his toxic gang, Islamic imperialism, Islamic invasions, Islamic vandalism is an extremely beautiful thing if the victim is Sanatana Dharma and Hindus.
Well said. It boils down to that.
Ultimately that. Okay. And during that Ayodhya episode, Irfan Habib singled out academics, researchers, scholars, archaeologists, editors, journalists who dared to do one of these two things or both the things. One, who dared to tell the truth about the Babri Masjid, which was built on the destroyed debris of Sri Ram Mandir in their professional capacity. Two, who dared to expose the misdeeds of this Stalinist clique of historians who basically masqueraded as historians.
And one of them was K.K. Mohammed.
Yeah. You should read the sheer, both in volume and in tone and in tenor. You should read the kind of attacks that Irfan Habib launched, unrelenting, vicious, and personal attacks at them, vulgar attacks, and them did not matter who they were.
But the gumption to continue doing this while a communal government was in power, where did it come from? With the confidence that the system is still with the...
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
The ecosystem backed them. They were all, like I said in an earlier episode, they had infiltrated even letters to the editor.
Rank and file.
To that level. That gave them that confidence anyway. Gumption. But the most diabolical and perhaps the most representative of all these attacks was directed at the doyen of Indian archaeology, one of the doyens of Indian archaeology, Professor B.B. Lal. He is also regarded as one of the greatest archaeologists that the world has produced.
That the world has seen. Okay.
Professor B.B. Lal. Okay. When he, reported the truths of the excavations at Ayodhya, Irfan Habib wrote a tract that is so obnoxious and vile, launching all kinds of aspersions, personal abuse, calling him an RSS agent, Chaddi, Sangi, communalist, BJP. You talk on... Professor B.B. Lal was a thoroughbred academic. He would report only the truths, objective scientific truths of what the excavations had revealed. He did not initiate the excavations. The court ordered excavations. And no evidence, no rebuttal.
So when there are no facts, the adjectives come into play.
No rebuttal, only slander. Okay? And when he did this, Sitaram Goyal, Namo Namaha, we have to be beholden to him. What a man. So he hit back at Irfan Habib, and I'll read out his words. It's beautiful. Irfan Habib would have been more honest if he had said that he was attacking B.B. Lal for no other reason than the latter's discovery of pillar bases which revealed the existence of a pre-Babri masjid structure at the same site.
And that is a fact.
End of story. Okay. And then I will mention one hilarious example. You see, Parag, such things, as bad, as dishonest, as vile as all this thing is, it is also hilarious. They lead to unintentional humor. All these things invariably happen to people like Irfan Habib because they have lived their entire lives as habitual liars. Okay? Let's read this hilarious story in Arun Shauri's words. It's extraordinary. Professor Irfan Habib announced that he had dated the artifacts found in the Ayodhya excavations by the carbon dating technique and found that these artifacts were of rather recent origin. And it so happened that an officer of the archaeological survey reviewed the procedures of Professor Irfan Habib and found that if Professor Habib's dating procedures were to be followed, then one would come to the conclusion that the reign of Emperor Akbar is yet to begin. It shall begin in 2009 AD.
What a takedown.
Eminent historians. Okay?
Arun Shauri.
This is what he wrote. Okay? And after this, I'll narrate one last episode related to Irfan Habib's serial misdeeds and distortions before we move on to the next stage. After the fall of the disputed structure in Ayodhya, an inscription on the former mosque's walls was recovered. And again, Meenakshi Jain writes on this. She is perhaps the last surviving breed of the old school. Rigorous, meticulous, patient, and almost he approaches her work almost like a tapasya.
Yeah. Flight of the Deities is her book.
Flight of the Deities. So this she writes in Rama and Ayodhya. Okay, fantastic. Okay, when this inscription was found on the walls of the demolished disputed structure, this is what Irfan Habib did next, in the words of Meenakshi Jain. This inscription, 5 by 2 feet, this inscription, 5 by 2 feet, fell from the walls of the masjid in 1992 and broke into two. But because it had been embedded in the wall, it was in an excellent state of preservation. You could read it very easily. The whole media was there, and so were many Karsevaks present there. I could not have put it in my pocket and planted it there. Irfan Habib must have realized the implication of this inscription. So his first instinct was to discredit it. He said it was a plant. But a plant from where? Okay, the Karsevaks planted it. But where did it come from? So he said, it came from a private collection. But how come no one saw it before? Then Habib backtracked and said that the inscription had been stolen from the Lucknow Museum. It was a Vishnu Hari inscription and was read by ASI's chief epigraphist on court's orders. Kunal Kishore, who was the OSD of the Ayodhya cell, visited the Lucknow Museum and took pictures of that inscription. One would have expected Habib to come forward and present his final opinion on this subject. He has not said a word.
He has not said a word. So once cornered, you slander or you keep quiet?
You see the levels at which they have gone. I mean, this is not even lying or misleading. This is sheer depravity. There is no other word.
Absolutely.
Obnoxious, sir. This is not all. In their capacity as the legal representatives of the All India Babri Masjid Action Committee. Remember?
Yeah.
Right?
The infamous
so
committee.
The All India Babri Masjid Action Committee was the client of eminent historians like Irfan Habib, Romila Thapar, all those fellows. Okay, I've read out their names earlier.
Yes.
So in their capacity as the legal representatives of this AIBMAC, Irfan Habib and his Marxist mafia members are also cited as witnesses in the pleadings filed by the Sunni Waqf Board in the courts that heard this Ayodhya case. Witness number 70 is Irfan Habib. And when this mafia gang knew that the ground beneath their feet was fast slipping, it was caving in, then they realized that they had no case. What did they do? Any guesses?
Forgery.
They simply failed to turn up for court hearings.
Okay.
Think about it, Parag. Think about it for a moment. At the very least, think about the fact that these fellows have not been punished even for contempt of court.
Yeah, this remains an open question. A lot of damage that is done has to be held accountable.
See? Okay? They have not been punished for lying, for misleading, for concocting and inventing history, for destruction of evidence.
And for what happened in Ayodhya.
Yes. For seeding, for provoking, fomenting and heightening tensions between Hindus and Muslims, and finally for causing the destruction of the Babri Masjid and the wave of communal riots that followed.
Absolutely. All sections of incitement should apply.
Yes. This is their work. Alleged historians. They are not politicians, remember. They had no vote bank.
And yet,
this is what they've done.
they need to be held to account.
And on that note, we can now come to the concluding part of this episode.
Before you get to that,
Yeah.
there is an anecdote, and please correct me if I'm wrong.
Mhm.
Is it to do with Irfan Habib or Muhammad Habib? If it is to do with Muhammad Habib, maybe we can skip it. Where I think Sitaram Goyal went to meet him. And
Yeah. Sitaram Goyal ji went to meet Muhammad Habib. And he describes him as a very arrogant man whose manners were worse than his syphilitic face.
Okay, it was so like father, like son.
Like father, like son. So let's come to the concluding portion of this episode. On the one hand, if glorifying the worst of Islamic excesses and atrocity is on one side, delighting in the humiliation of Hindus and even denying them the historical memory of their trauma is the other side of this coin of historical distortion. You don't have a right to even mourn your ancestors, to keep alive the memories of your tragedy. This also comes out in all their writings. Two examples. This is what Irfan Habib writes about the so-called Delhi Sultanate with a straight face. Quote, the new conquerors and rulers were of a different faith, Islam, from that of their predecessors. Their principal achievements, the principal achievements of who? The Islamic conquerors, lay in a great systematization of agrarian exploitation and an immense concentration of the resources so obtained. So, Hindus should be thankful.
Thankful.
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the thought that was crossing my mind after you said
For being battered, brutalized, converted forcibly, cut off from their ancestral ancient roots, from their dharma, for being enslaved on an epic scale, we should be thankful. Yeah, Hindu should be thankful. And here's one key phrase, how these fellows bury their true intent in clever phraseology. Look at what he writes here. The new conquerors and rulers were of a different faith from that of our predecessors. Meaning Islam came from outside as an invading faith, right?
okay.
So their predecessors, meaning who had invaded India earlier? Foreigners who had invaded India before Muslims. Where does this tie into? It means that India was always invaded. It had no culture, it had no civilization, no customs of its own. And that all that is good
It's because of various
is
invaders.
because of the gift of the invaders. This directly flows from the spurious Aryan invasion theory. You see the levels at which they have gone, Parag. And finally, we'll round off this episode with one more example. Summation of several examples from Irfan Habib's writing. This relates to his work on Shivaji and the Maratha Empire. According to Irfan Habib, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj's kingdom was a robber empire. His soldiers were basically bandits and robbers who hailed from the low class, and they were naked, starved rascals.
In so many words.
In so many words. And these are the adjectives that Irfan Habib has happily, joyously lifted from colonial British histories, and he has endorsed them with glee. I think this should give a representative flavor of Irfan Habib's brand of history writing and the kind of mindset that impelled him, that motivated him to pass this trash, this mountain of abuse as Indian history.
And every piece of vile garbage that was uttered, they literally had ICHR as a publishing house. It became history.
Exactly. It was their bank, it was their fiefdom, it was their empire, and they were protected.
And the official channel to make it history.
Yes. It was also the great weapon to destroy 3 generations of Hindu children.
That is significant damage. And again, it's worth repeating.
I call Indian education, especially this whole social sciences and history, Indian education as a national ordinance factory for producing traitors.
Well said again. In fact, social and science, I don't think can exist together. I mean, it's questionable. Before we conclude, again, please correct me if I'm mistaken. Was Irfan Habib the same person who said that temples were legit targets? They invited it because all the wealth was stored there?
Muhammad Habib started that.
Okay, so father
Muhammad
said
Habib
that.
started that. That is a standard template.
Standard template.
Standard template. He started that template first.
So temple destruction invasion is justified because wealth was there.
Wealth was there.
Okay. Okay, so Sandeep, I really wish I would come up with something else, but again, every time you end, it leaves, I think, me and probably a lot of people who are listening despondent and furious at what has happened in the past. So, with that, let's conclude this episode number 7 on Irfan Habib, and we shall continue the series.
Absolutely.
And go back to you bringing to light a lot of facts that many of us and many of the audience would like to hear. Thank you so much again.
Thank you. Thanks, Parag.
So apologies if this sounds repetitive, but again, like the last 2 episodes, one does get somber, despondent and furious at what Sandeep brings to light. When we spoke about the fact that it is a privilege that Bharat was invaded and we don't even have a right to mourn our ancestors, I think does leave one speechless. So please bear with this part, but one does hope that at some point of time all the subterfuge is held to account through a commission and inquiry. So thank you all. Thank you so much for being part of this mega series and watching this, listening this, and sharing this further. So we look forward to having you join us again for the 8th episode of this mega series of Destruction of Indian History by Marxists. And in the next episode, we shall talk about the clique of 7, as they're called. We covered Romila Thapar, Ramcharan Sharma, and Irfan Habib. In the next episode, we shall talk about D.N. Jha and the damage that he caused, and dwell and pick on Sandeep's scholarly research and bring facts to light like he's bringing with each passing episode. So please like, share, subscribe, and give us your super thanks so that Dharma podcasts are able to reach a wider audience. A profuse thanks to all of you joining again. We look forward to seeing you again.